Hey, good evening and welcome to Ask for Help TFL Live, what we do here every Saturday night where we take your questions and we try and give you answers as best we can. I want to say hello to Robert Marvin, who was the early bird in our chat tonight. Pierre, we have Adam Green. Who else do we have here? Corey Mack, Ben Brady, Phil Morris, John Kitchen, Mr. Tremblay from Quebec City. I can't pronounce your first name. David Sell, and yeah, we're all here. We're just waiting for Brian. He's having some technical difficulties at home right now, so we're just going to wait for him to come back. When he comes back, then we will get underway. In the meantime, while we're waiting for Brian to sort out his issues, I did some printing this week. And I've been doing different prints throughout the week. And I wanted to do something that really was a useful print. And you know, I've talked about useful prints before. And for anybody that knows me knows I have a lot of audio gear. One thing I don't have is shock mounts for my microphones. So this week I created, or actually I didn't create, I just basically downloaded this one from Thingiverse and made a shock mount for my Rode NTG2. I probably will make another one for this mic that's right here, but this one's designed so that it can go onto a camera, and it can just go right into the hot shoe of a camera. You can plug it in. If your camera takes XLR, that's great. If not, you can do something like this. I have a setup right here. This is my DSLR. This has a smaller shotgun. This is an Audio-Technica shotgun microphone. It's just a little mini one, but it's a really good shotgun. And underneath I've got my audio bank. This is the Tascam DR-C2, I believe. And this guy, I just love this recorder because basically this has great preamps on it, so I can run audio in here, feed the audio back into my camera. And it really works well because now I have scratch audio on the camera. So when I'm lining things up in post, I can do it very easily. It looks like Brian is back, I think. Do we have audio?
Am I back?
I don't know. Are you back? Hey, there's Brian. Let's welcome Brian, everybody.
Happy Saturday.
He's wearing his Boba Fett helmet. Or
yes,
Mandalorian
and I can
helmet.
barely hear you because I'm having these play through the head. So it's not going well. I'm just going to go ahead and take this off now.
Okay. Right. So we've all been doing prints this week. My wife's been working on prints for an upcoming episode. Some easy stuff that you can print for yourself if you're going camping, if you want to have some fun around the house, do some game night. This is all stuff that you can print, very small, very compact. You can take it with you if you wanted to go camping. We've got a few more people to say hello to. We got Shaka Ripper and 3D Printing and Painting. There's our good friend Jerry Knapp. Stephen Johnson, Gary T, High Tech Redneck, KKP 3D. That's our good friend Tim, LB Sharp, and Pete Sandy. Good evening. Welcome to the show. So Brian was having a little difficulty this evening, as you guys know. And
really, I bought a new interface, okay? So I can probably bring it into frame here. This is the Motu M1 with a cute little live view of my, levels and everything like that. So I was able to clean up my desk a little bit.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Yeah,
hey, there's Joseph Jolly.
Of course, I had to install drivers, and then it told me you have to reboot, and then I rebooted, and then Chrome's like, you don't have any cameras. I'm like, oh, boy. A typical last-minute AV stuff. That's what happens.
Yeah. For those of you guys that saw our rocket episode this week, Brian and I had a lot of fun making that episode. We had a lot of fun.
We sure did.
Flying rockets, and we decided that we wanted to do it again. So we we were in contact with the president of Apogee Components down in Colorado. And if you're not familiar with Apogee Components, they are a rocket company. They sell everything that's related to the rocketry hobby, the model rocketry hobby. So they kind of gave us an idea for what we're going to do next. And Brian and I, we're going to talk a little bit about this before we get into questions tonight. Brian and I talked about it a little bit, and we thought it was a great idea. And I talked with the organizer of the Airdrie Club, and he thought it was a great idea. So what we're going to do is we're going to make this rocket, which is, I don't know how well you guys can see that. This
Like
is
a catalog from the 1960s.
This is called the Rocket. It was designed by Tim Van Milligan, president of Apogee Rockets. We are doing this three ways. The first way is traditionally, we're going to build it out of cardboard and plastic and balsa wood. The second way is we're going to do a composite like we did on the Jericho missile. And then third, we're going to do it 100% completely 3D printed. We're going to paint them all up. We're going to dare you guys to tell us which is which. And we're going to set them off and we're going to test them against one another. Then we're going to go through the pros and cons of 3D printing your rocket completely, or doing parts for your rocket, or doing it the traditional way. So we're going to go through all those and let you guys, if you're interested in doing rocketry, make up your minds on which way you'd like to go. So, Brian, how was your week?
Pretty good. As you saw here, we'll reach over. I finally got my 10S5 running, and it's printing quite nice. That was 3 different material shifts of filament runouts, so I would treat that as a success. There's still a little bit of warble on my machine to sort out, but it is far cleaner than it's been in a while. So
very cool.
Now this is off the machine. Now I've got a Cyberman helmet for somebody printing, so that'll be done in about 10 days. So maybe we'll see an update by next week sometime.
Mike,
it's hard with a big printer. It's so easy to burn through materials. So
I don't doubt it. Mike Hunt is saying, rocket schmockets, you should have a second channel for them. No, because they're related to 3D printing, so we're going to do them on this channel. Let's jump into the questions for tonight. We've got a few, starting with Osmar Osorio. I hope I got that right. Better, just easier to call him Ozzy. So he says, hello, I saw your video on the Bondtech upgrade you did on the CR-10. I was wondering if you recommend lowering the current of the motor. In the video, it was not done, though it says to do it in the PDF file. I'm getting ready to install my new extruder, but do not have the tool for the lowering of the current. I never lowered the current on mine, I don't believe. I did change the steps, and I hope you're not getting those two confused. But I did change the E steps. I don't think I touched the current though. Brian?
yeah, the current of the motor shouldn't really be required to modify unless either it's running too hot or you're missing steps. So traditionally with mine, regardless of the setup, I usually run them at about 800, whether it's 0.8 volts or 800 milliamps. I keep getting them messed up, but anyways, 800 is the number I use as my reference, and I generally find that's the right point where the motors don't get too hot, but I'm not skipping steps. You can go as low as, depending on the stepper, as low as 550 to 600. Especially with the Bondtech, with the reduction in torque, you don't need as much power going through that. But that being said, I'm a man of trial by error, or trial by fire in this case. You know, just run it and see. You know, put your hand around it, see if it's getting a little too hot there. I think you should only be adjusting that really if you're actually missing steps.
Yeah, I think so too. I don't think you should have to change that at all.
No, it's usually set good from the factory for that motor. There might be minor adjustments, but
again, I don't think I changed mine. If you do have to change it, I recommend that you get yourself a ceramic screwdriver, and then just go in and tweak it just a little bit. Make sure that you have a multimeter on hand so that you can see exactly what the voltage or the current is that's going to that motor. Robert Hansen. Let's talk about Robert Hansen. Can you bring up the pictures or?
Oh, you're gonna make me bring up pictures. All right, hang on.
Yeah, I'm gonna go to you. Here. There we go. Look at that, Hansen. I'll read the question. He says, I have an upgraded metal extruder for some reason. It keeps shaving the filament. I've checked the tension of the arm, but for some reason it still does it. I have a picture of what it looks like. Maybe you guys can help me out. The top picture is how the hob gear currently sits, and the bottom is when it's shaving off the filament. And I can tell you exactly what's happening here. The hob gear is not high enough. That hob gear needs to be brought up a little bit. So all you're going to do, Robert, in this case, is just loosen up the screw on that. Just bring it up a little bit so that the hob gear is riding at the very top and the very bottom of that idler gear. And then you should have no problems whatsoever. Make sure that when you do tighten that back up, that you have that screw on the flat part of the motor shaft, and it shouldn't slide anywhere. Just give it a little tightening and you should be fine. Brian?
I was actually just going to comment on that because looking at this photo of his, the gear is not entirely on that flat edge.
Yeah, I'm seeing that
so
as
that
well.
could introduce some other issues. Yeah, just make sure your grub screw lines up, preferably more centered on that flat edge. Some of the motors come out as an O shape instead of a D shape rod, but by having this D shape, you're going to have better quality over the long run because it's going to grip better. You're not going to have any slippage. That will help for it. And then, as you mentioned, yeah, raising up that gear, it does look fairly low on there. It actually looked like it was peeling itself a bit too, so it's probably being guided a little bit towards the edge, and because you have a metal extruder, it's etching away at your material rather than the extruder assembly itself.
Yep. Alrighty. So, Phil Morris says the 3D printing fail on rocket launch was pretty interesting. Lots to be learned in terms of materials and strengthening prints to survive launch stresses. Yes. One of the things that we found that was very interesting to us was the tough PLA that we printed the one rocket in held up beautifully. How long it will hold up over time is a whole nother question. Secondly, the PET G1 held up remarkably well. The only thing it had was a little deformation. I think that was right on the seam. So we're going to reprint that and we're going to see how it goes. I did give you back, Brian.
Yeah, I'm stuck here for a moment.
Oh.
I accidentally deleted my Blackmagic capture.
So
yeah.
yeah.
You get to look at a desktop screen for now.
Yeah. So Robert Marvin saying, "Give us back, Brian."
Okay.
So
No.
please stand by. All right. So let's get on to the next question then. From Mike Kirk. He says, I'm kind of new to this. I have a Chiron with a Volcano Hotend and using Octoprint, and it seems to work fine. I have a slight idea that Marlin is, but what the heck is it? Thanks, Mike Kirk from Ontario, Canada. Mike, Marlin is the firmware in which operates your machine. Basically, that's the background code that is controlling everything that goes on your 3D printer. Now, you can certainly make changes to Marlin, both using Arduino IDE and now, of course, using Visual Studio Code. Now, that being said, if you don't know much about Marlin, I wouldn't go futzing around in there unless you're just planning on playing around and not uploading it to your machine, because you can do far more damage to your machine by uploading bad firmware than you can if you're just kind of experimenting yourself. What I would do if I was new to it is I'd do a little bit more research, watch a few more videos, and then, of course, go ahead and just pull in some Marlin code onto your computer, open it up in the Arduino IDE or Visual Studio Code, whichever you prefer to use, and then try it out, see what it does. But do not upload it to your machine, because we don't want you to give us a call in a couple of weeks or send us a message going, I don't know what I did. Because we don't know what you did, and it's pretty hard to fix in that regard.
And each machine is unique. I can't just give you a firmware that magically works, unfortunately.
Yeah. And we've had a few requests about that this week too. People wanting us to have firmware files for them, and unfortunately we don't have a library of firmware files. We do our best to help you guys out with whatever firmware issues you're having, because Brian and I both have played with firmware. Brian more so than I. Ben makes a great point here. He says, read the documentation on marlinfw.org, and that will give you a lot of background information on what Marlin is and how to use it. And that is a great way to do it. Loch Ness Gaming, Richard, how's are you? I am doing well. I'm getting older and grayer, and as you can tell, I didn't shave this week.
I think he's asking how's R2.
Oh, R2.
Droid.
Are you
Look at
R2?
you, yeah.
R2. I haven't done much with him over the last little bit. He's probably going to wait again and now until our winter project, because that's something we can do in the winter here in the house. Because we're not going to be flying rockets in the winter. I'll tell you that right now.
I beg to differ.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to be watching.
No.
Yeah. Other than that, I think we're saving our bigger projects for the winter because we have such a long winter here. We're going to save some of those bigger projects and do them over the winter, and then we'll bring you guys along for the ride. Breaker 19, I have a model I'm trying to print, but there are a ton of supports that are not over the build plate. It's so hard to get them out. I haven't been successful yet. Any ideas?
Yeah. Get some of these dental tools. Yes, I just so happen to have a set of 5 of them here. These you can get on Amazon for, oh geez, probably $20-30 here. And I don't know if it'll focus in. But they are strong enough to break off most PLA supports, and especially the ones that have hooks. A good set of pliers will help.
Yes.
It's just about digging at it. Now, as you go to stronger materials, these might not be as good. I have bent a few of these. I think this is probably one of them right here that I've bent on
I've
PETG.
bent tons of them.
Yeah, it happens, but you know they're cheap enough, they're disposable, and they're going to save your fingers. I've spared far too much blood with these hands on ripping off stupid supports. Now, that being said, in the future, you might want to look into starting to play with your support settings, and the caveat to that is note down all your settings that do work right now before you mess with them. But if you start going into the gap in between your supports and the rest of your model, and you start increasing that, they're going to be easier to fish out. But it will result in a potential for more failed supports. Richard, what are your thoughts?
I'm right in that same boat with you. Because I deal with supports a lot on a lot of different things that I do.
Oh, yes.
Really make sure that you've got enough space between the actual support and the model. They'll come off easier. We've done a video on that showing you exactly how to use supports and what supports should be used where. If you're using supports everywhere, you can go from the build plate and you can go from everywhere. Try and orientate your model so you have less supports. That's another way of doing it.
And as a couple of people have said, tree supports.
Tree supports,
case in point is my Mando helmet here that just came off the printer. As you can see, it was all tree supports. Even though it kind of went a wacky route, it pulled off in 3 pieces. So it actually worked out quite well.
Yeah, it looks great. Somebody asked me this week why our launcher didn't work. And the reason our launcher didn't work was because we were using this. And this is basically a 8-pack of AA batteries giving us 12 volts. The problem with this setup is that it didn't supply enough current down the wire. So we talked about wire replacement. We talked about a couple of other things. And the easiest thing to do was to go with that.
Yeah.
This is a 12 volt 1800 milliamp battery, and it's rechargeable. I did do a test. We are going to put the launcher back together, the launch controller, and when we go back out, I know for a fact now we have more than enough current to send down that line, because I burnt a couple of the E-matches that set off the rockets, and I can tell you, yeah, they went up pretty fast. So that was our problem right there.
Breaker 19 was actually asking a little bit more about tree supports. I don't know if we actually went into that in our support video. I think we briefly covered it, but if you search up if you search up tree in your Cura, I think it's been there since 4.1 or something. If
It's
you
actually been
search
there
that up,
since 3.
has it
Since a
been there
lot,
since 3?
yeah,
Okay.
since the latter versions of 3. Yeah.
Yeah, just search up tree, and then you'll see an experimental option called tree supports. You select that, and then go back up to your support settings for the normal ones and say no supports. Otherwise, it will generate both regular and tree supports. And without diving too much into it, the default settings are good for 90% of prints.
Yep, you bet. Let's get on to the next one from LB Sharp. And he says, I've got a CR-10S with direct drive kit, BL Touch, Micro Swiss Hotend, using Xyltech PLA Cura 4.4.1. I've calibrated the E-steps flow rate, checked the extruder gears, replaced the short Bowden tube. I apologize for the quality of video. I could not watch your video, unfortunately. The format that you sent it to me made it unwatchable. Unfortunately, I don't have a way of watching the end tag that you had on there, so I did not see your video. But I was trying to let you hear the clicking sound. The printer always prints to about the same amount, and then it starts clicking, then jams. It does not matter what I'm printing. I will print for a while, and then finally it jams. It jams about a 1/4 inch from the nozzle, never near the hot end. That tells me you've got a retraction issue. Brian?
I was thinking the exact same thing. Yep. Retraction with a Micro Swiss. You can't be using the default settings for your printer. 5 to 6 millimeters will result in it pulling back the hot material into the heat break. And because of how the heat break functions, the material actually swells a bit in there and will cause it to unnecessarily clog. And if you're getting this far in, you know, if it's clogging right off the bat, you would have a heat creep issue. But that sure sounds like a retraction issue. Even with my volcanoes, I only run roughly a 1.5 to 1.8 millimeter retraction. So keep that in mind, get down. Unfortunately, it will potentially result in an increase in stringing, but at that point you can start looking at dropping your temperatures a bit to deal with that issue.
Parker Cooper's asking, can you print holes with countersinks? Yes, you can. However, you are going to have to model that in your modeling software first. You'll have to put that little dip in there, that countersink. But it will print countersinks. There's no setting for it in Cura, and there's no setting for it other than doing it in your modeling software.
Yeah, I do it in Fusion 360. Either I will bore my own wider hole to hide the screw there, or in the case of angled ones, I'll use a chamfer tool and chamfer it in the software myself, and that seems to work fairly good. And when all else fails, just increase your perimeter walls and take a drill to it afterwards, and just, you know, a drill tip itself, I'd have to look at my drill, but I'm pretty sure they're close to a 45-degree angle there, and you can just do a little surface etch, if not with a drill, with a Dremel, and just give it a bit of a chamfer there, and you should be okay without damaging the integrity of the model unless your walls were far too thin to begin with.
Parker Cooper says, I'm not good with the software. Practice. That's exactly what I've been spending a lot of time with Fusion 360 this week, trying to convert RockSim files. Now, RockSim, if you're not familiar with it, is a rocket building software. It is also a simulator, so you can simulate launches in different weather conditions with different engine sizes, that sort of thing. But you can design from scratch a complete rocket inside of RockSim, and then you can export that so that you can pull it into your favorite 3D printing program and make some rockets in your 3D printing program or in your 3D CAD program. What is the best glue for PLA? I'm
sure we're very opinionated on this matter.
The stuff that I use now, I was using CA glue. Then I stopped using CA glue because I found another glue that works very well, and now I can't find it anywhere.
Ben Brady saying 3D Gloop. I've heard good things about that, but I haven't used it myself.
I've used it. It does tend to dry up really quickly. The stuff that I'm using, let me just pull it up here. I think I know what it is.
I mean, I still shamefully use super glue. It's probably not the most efficient method, but the gel types are nice to work with. We also have this stuff. It's an instant activation, and I'll see if I can find it here on Amazon. But it's like a super glue, but it comes with a spray bottle, a aerosol spray bottle that when you spray it on there, it instantly cures, and that stuff is rock solid.
It is. It's very good stuff. I'm just trying to
Bond, I think it's called.
I'm just trying to find the stuff that I've been using.
I will. Where's my buttons here? Here it is. Here's the stuff I use. It's called Instant Bond. I've had a lot of good luck with it there. You can find it. Amazon's not the best example here, but it was the quickest to pull up. I buy mine at Home Depot here in Canada. Most hardware stores will have it, but as I said, it's nice because you can work with it for a little bit, and then when you spray it with the spray, it instantly cures. So there's no risk of checking it with your fingers to see if it's still wet. It works great for me.
I know the person that carries it in town, and of course I'm trying to find it on their website, and I cannot.
Bark Cooper saying ultraviolet glue. I've actually used resin before. I've also used some of the ultraviolet curing glues, and they kind of do work, but I find they're very brittle. So unless you're, and plus when you cure it, if you're trying to cure it inside something, you're only going to really cure on the surface level very well. So I only use that for kind of brief, like seams and things like that. But the underside, I want a stronger glue usually.
Keep talking for a second. There's some on my wife's desk.
Everyone's got some opinions here. Super glue, Gorilla Glue, Shoe Goo, SCI Grip, acrylic glue, CA with baking soda. Ben, I've never actually tried curing it with baking soda. What I do know about super glues is they cure with moisture, which is why when it touches your fingers, it tends to bind really quickly. So I've seen people, you can get different spray bottles. You could try isopropyl alcohol if you got a surplus, and just try spraying that on it and see if it cures any quicker. Plastic welder, weld on 16, 3D glue,
this
of course.
This is the stuff right here.
Wow. Oh, there we go.
Come on, focus.
Is that Mastercraft brand?
No, this is the stuff I got from Spool 3D.
Oh.
I believe it's weld on 16. It's weld on 16.
Weld on 16, eh? IPS. Yep. Okay. SCI grip. Yeah.
Yeah, this stuff works great. When you're putting PLA together, this stuff will bond PLA very, very fast. So it comes out of this tube very quickly. So again, take it slow, take it easy. This stuff is probably going to be overall cheaper than 3D Gloop, and it goes a little bit further. But man, does this ever bond PLA?
Wow, and that stuff comes up into like a pint even. You can get a gallon, a pint, or a 5-ounce tube. So yeah, that's probably the most economical.
Yeah, you can get it. You can get it pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's see.
LB Sharp was asking in there, what is and how do I use Z-Hop when retraction? So what happens is every time you would tell your printer to retract, Z-Hop proceeds to add in a jump that moves the Z gantry up a little bit, moves to the next position, drops down, and then reinserts the filament. I've seen a lot of mixed results with people, but I prefer to use it myself just because if there was any filament swelling or my bed was imbalanced, it gives me that extra lift just to ensure that I'm not going to come in contact with any of my supports. It doesn't have to be a large one either.
Nope.
I've done 0.2 to 0.4 millimeters, which is basically 10 times higher than the nozzle width, basically. It adds a little bit more time to your print, but I've never had the stringing issues. I think Shep brought out a video where they found with Cura specifically, if you went and printed a model and turned off that Z-Hop, you had less stringing. For me, it has not been that much of an issue. So I prefer Z-Hop. Enable it, see how it works for you. If it's causing more problems, just turn it right back off.
Yeah, there you go. Last question from Pierre Blanchard, or Blanchard. I know I messed up your last name, Pierre. He's in the chat tonight. He says, "Good day, First Layer. My question is about Chimera and Titan Arrow. What is the difference? Is one better than the other? And what do you prefer? Thanks greatly for your answer." Chimera and Titan they're very close in what they are as far as designs go. The Chimera, there's been a lot of hype around it. It does work better than the Arrow does. At the end of the day, however, it's all dependent on you. I've never used them myself. I've used the Titan. I've used the Titan extruders. I think they work great. The Chimera can be done both in direct drive and in Bowden setup, if I'm not incorrect about that.
I've only seen it direct drive. I mean, basically all you need to know is the Chimera is a much improved design. It's definitely engineered a bit better. The Titan Arrow has actually been cloned by many companies, and you can kind of see why when you look at the design. It's very simple. It's a very open concept. But when you get to the Chimera, it's been dialed in a little bit more. The fins, for instance, are designed more for better airflow across your hot end. I've heard great things about it. I can't picture spending $150 on an extruder assembly these days.
Yeah, me either.
I've 3D printed some pretty darn good direct drive assemblies, and the dual gear extruders can be had for $30 Canadian on Amazon. So I did want to play with one, but at the price point they're listing it at, and the modifications required to work with my machines, I actually found the open source modding community was a bit more ready to go. But let us know in the chat. I think a couple of you have mentioned before you do have that kit. Let us know what you think about it.
A lot about it. I use 3D Gloop. I heard baking soda is great for filling gaps. Baking soda is the best for filling gaps. James Monk is asking, does anyone know how to use dual extruder with Marlin?
I do to an extent. It depends on which one you have, because my dual extruder system that has not run in probably a year because I'm still experimenting with it. It involved enabling a couple more settings in Marlin, and you had to define the nozzle gap between the two nozzles. So, I mean, let us know, because we always have to clarify this. Are we talking about a mixing extruder hot end, or are we talking about two separate nozzles? Because the configurations are very different. Yeah,
okay. I don't know much about it, so I can't really answer because I don't use dual extrusion. The only thing that I've got that's a dual extruder right now is the Flash Forge upstairs, but that's got two extruders. So, yeah, I didn't have to mess with anything.
Is Marlin's management is simply you tell it that T0, which is your primary extruder your hot end, if you will, T0, you tell it that there is a T1, and you tell it the distance in between those two nozzles if they are on the same fixed mount. If you have different things like magnetic switching extruders or tool exchangers, they all have different settings in Marlin designed to interpret two factors. Number one, what to do when you're switching from one hot end to the other. Yep. And number two is basically how it's to interact with the rest of it. Usually the offset, because when you print with dual nozzles at the basic level, when you switch, it has to go and change the offsets of where it think it is to adjust it so that your two nozzles would move to the same point if you governed it.
Parker Cooper's asking, what do you guys think of combo printers, laser, CNC, etc.? I will give you my honest opinion. I'm not a huge fan. While some people think they're the cat's meow and they're the best thing since sliced bread, I'm not convinced just yet, and I'll tell you why. I think that if you're going to buy a 3D printer, that's the tool you should use it for. If you're going to buy a CNC machine, that's the tool you should use it for. If you're going to buy a laser engraver or laser cutter, that's the tool you should use it for. And yes, that takes up a little bit more room in your house, and it is easy with some machines, like a review that we've got coming up. I'm going to be showing that off. I did not find it that appealing with the Lotmaxx, unfortunately, the SC-10 Shark. I love the SC-10 Shark. I think it's a well-built machine. I think that they could have done things a little bit differently. There's a company out there by the name of E-Cube Maker. They've got a system that's just basically swap. There's no messing around, no taking fans off, none of that nonsense. It's just one thumb screw, you pull it off, you put the new one on, put the thumb screw back in, and the machine will recognize what is on there based on the board that is on that new tool. Now, do I think that there's a real place for them out there? Yeah, I think there's a place for them out there, but I'm not a huge fan of lasers that are not enclosed. I don't care if you're engraving, I don't care if you're cutting. You really need to have an enclosure, and because of the different materials that you're going to be working with, including acrylic, wood, and any number of metals, you really need to have that enclosure and venting out those gases properly. You can get very sick from engraving acrylic in your home on an open air printer, because you have to stay there and watch it, because if you don't, if something goes wrong, it can start a fire very, very easily. So be aware of that. Is there a place for them in the market? Yeah, of course there is. Somebody's always going to want something that's, 3-in-1. I mean, we buy 3-in-1 stuff all the time. I buy a drill so that I can make holes with it, cut holes with it. I buy a driver so that I can drive screws with it. I buy a hammer so I can hammer things. I don't have those all in one, and they have specific uses, and that's my opinion on it. Brian, what about you?
Yeah, I treat them like an all-in-one computer. You're not going to get the best 3D printer. You're not going to get the best laser engraver. You're not going to get the best CNC. You're getting an all-in-one machine that's supposed to satisfy the criteria but not set the marks. So there's going to be some shortfalls. You're not with an all-in-one PC, you're not going to get the best monitor. Now, what does that also mean? Well, if your monitor goes, the machine itself is not exactly easy to repair, and that's kind of the difference here, is that it is somewhat easy to repair, but in order to switch the functionalities on a lot of these machines right now, you have to do a lot of modification. It's not something you can do in a 5-minute swap, and that's the unfortunate thing I'm seeing. I'm waiting until someone comes out with like a magnetic carriage that you just slide it apart and it just kind of goes and does it. I can tell you right now, from working in the industrial control realm, I personally don't like to see personal routers, if you will, that are based off a 3D printer design, because I don't think the steppers have enough torque to handle the load of a spinning drill. Laser engravers, I've mentioned it previously, I don't like how the software handles laser engraving, and both of those activities do require active management, because you can't put the same fail-safes in place that you can put on Marlin for monitoring temperature. It's kind of a disaster waiting to happen, and basically anybody who would need that much CNC capability or anything, I would find would probably buy a quality machine. And anybody who's looking for a small scale, if it's only an extra $100 to get that feature, why not? But I outsource a lot of those things now.
Yeah.
It's hard to justify a $1,000 laser engraver when I can hire somebody for $150 to do the one-off. Let's be honest.
Yeah, and if you've got no need for those other things, then it's just a waste of money and a waste of time, and a waste. It's a waste of a machine that could be doing something really well, one thing really well, instead of trying to do several things half-assed.
And if you want to look into what happens with that, and I'm sorry if I offend anybody with this, but look at Creality's laser engraver, the one that you have magnetically attached to the front of your printer. if it worked that well, we'd still be seeing it on the market and people would be playing with it, but we don't.
Yeah, there you go. Want to get to a couple more questions here. How do you fix a shell on a STL Joshi 33? It all depends. If you've got issues and you've downloaded a part from Thingiverse or somewhere else and it's not watertight, of course, it's not going to print very well. You can bring it into something like Mesh Mixer and fix it there. That's probably the easiest and cheapest way to do it. But if you really don't know much about fixing STLs, you can do some minor repair inside of some of the slicers, but your best bet is probably using Mesh Mixer. Brian?
Yeah, most of the time I've had any printer issues with models. If Cura finds holes that it can't patch or whatever, usually I've just opened it in Windows 3D Builder, which is built into Windows 10. It does some mesh repair, and it just kind of works. What you got to bear in mind is whenever you receive an STL file, STL is actually very archaic in how it's designed. It doesn't have the intelligence to tell you if a mesh is complete. It's simply a giant document of triangles. It's actually just vertexes and what joins it all together. And so, it'll tell you there's a mesh in there, and you'll load it into software. It'll attempt to render it. But as with most video game models and different modeling techniques, unless it was modeled solid, the software has to try and guess how that's meant to be solid. And so, actually, my first answer would be if you pull something from Thingiverse and you can't print it because it's got holes in it, have you tried contacting the author on Thingiverse? Because sometimes the files that are posted on there are not the native files that they were generated in. So if it was Fusion 360, you have to generate an STL out of it, but you can still work with it better on its originating format than what they send to Thingiverse. And then, of course, if that doesn't work out, you can attempt to repair it yourself, but your mileage will definitely vary on that.
Breaker 19, what's the best color or filament to use if you plan on printing it? And this is probably going back to an earlier question. If you're planning on printing anything for your 3D printer, my recommendation is use PETG. Because it is stronger, it's less brittle than PLA over time, and it will work for most everything. I mean, you can make parts that will go around your Hotend out of PETG and they won't melt on you. So that would be my recommendation. Color, it's all up to you.
Yeah, anything that comes in contact with any heat source, I would say use something better than PLA. My boards, admittedly, most of my PCBs are mounted on PLA mounts. However, they are risen off that. They're not sitting directly against it. Remember that PLA starts to soften and becomes malleable at about 65 to 70 degrees Celsius. That's why 60 is the ideal printing temperature for your bed. Anything warmer than that, it will start to deform. You'll get things like my vase, if you didn't see that already, that kind of melted. And that was just sitting in the sun at 20 degrees Celsius. So even just light can sometimes be enough for the material to heat up. PETG is a great option if your machine can handle it. ABS is ABS, I think, is still actually a little bit preferred over PETG when it comes to structural.
Yeah.
But it is so much harder to print. It's harder for the fumes. So we always say just PETG. And then, of course, anything structural, the stronger material, the better. If you can do nylon, that's great. But I would say PETG is usually strong enough. My printer downstairs, my 10S5, it's got a 1 meter tall gantry, and so the brace that I actually bought, I want to say it's almost a half inch, like a 5/16 or maybe even 7/16 rod, and I custom designed some clamps on either end to hold the frame together, and that's in PLA, and it's been okay. So, to try with PLA. If that's all you got on hand, give it a go, and then if it doesn't work your way up.
The Pinger is asking, hello, I bought an Ender 3 V2, and when I slice and attempt to print a XYZ calibration cube, it prints about the first 10 layers and the last 10 layers and nothing in between. I've tried multiple SD cards and slicers. That tells me you've got a clogging issue. Or what could be happening is that and this is something I've experienced, on the extruder itself, check to make sure that gear is actually tight. what can happen is it can think it's printing and it's not moving any material down, and then just that gear will move into the right position again, and then material will start flowing again. So check the gear. That's what I would do.
Yeah, if it's happening at the same height, what I'll also like you to try to do is try to set up a little cylinder in vase mode. That way you won't waste a lot of material, and print it and swirl up and see if it fails at the exact same height. If it does, that's fascinating, to be honest with you. But
Yeah.
I'd like to see how the printer responds, because the calibration cube does work fine. What's interesting is that your printer is continuing to resume, and it's continuing to flow after a certain point. So I'd like to see if that repeats with different files.
Send us some pictures to questions@thefirstlayer.com.
Or post it on our Facebook group.
Or our Facebook group. Mike Hunt is asking, I heard you guys talking earlier about the Micro Swiss Hotend. How, in your opinion, might the CR-10S Pro benefit from this upgrade? I'll tell you straight off, you're going to get a much better print quality out of that Hotend. The Hotend that comes with the CR-10S Pro is the same design as every other freaking Hotend that Creality has ever made. It is not a true it's not a true what's the one, a V6? It's not a true V6.
It's got that weird block on it, right?
Yeah, I would go with the Micro Swiss over the stock Hotends on Creality stuff every time. They just give better prints. All of my Creality products here at home all have Micro Swisses on them, and I will tell you, I have not gone back, and I've never had to, and I've never had a clog in a Micro Swiss.
Well, and the other thing too is you're removing the factor of a misaligned Bowden tube. That's the primary reason I tell people to go that route, because there is a lot of hesitation. I've read lots of issues with people having clogs on Micro Swisses, and that's just because of the change in how an all-metal Hotend in general is different from a Bowden tube setup. Now, in my case, I found, because I swapped out my Bowden tubes a lot, I did get clogs with the original Hotend. If you do not align, well, first of all, if you don't have a good cut on your Bowden tube, you're going to have issues. And then the other one too is if you don't insert it the full way down, or you insert it too deep and it starts to compress upon itself, you introduce a whole set of clogging factors down in the heated area. So if you're if you're absolutely stuck and you go for a route with Capricorn tubing, that'll help with that. But more often than not, most of the clogs I've seen with people are a result of incorrectly inserting the Bowden tube back into those original Hotends.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with the auto metal ones, the Bowden tube only goes up to the top of the heat break, which is usually halfway up your heat sink inside your block. So if it's misaligned a little bit in there, it actually gives you a bit more room to play with for failure than if the Bowden tube went right down to the Hotend altogether. That's just been my experience. But the Micro Swiss, it is nice. It's nice because you can drop it right into Creality machines. I've used clone J-heads, and I've used the official E3D stuff. And if E3D made a Creality style Hotend, I probably would have picked theirs up. But Micro Swiss does a darn good job with their aluminum Hotend.
They sure do. Let's get into a question here from Eric B. Opinions on PLA Plus. PLA Plus, to me, I've used a lot of it as of late. And PLA Plus, I'm going to tell you, if you don't anneal it, it's basically like PLA. And you do have to print it a little hotter. If you do print it a little hotter, like around that 210, 215 area, you are going to get some additional benefit from it. But again, PLA Plus, unless you really have a need for it, save your money and get yourself some regular PLA. If you are going to anneal it, and what I mean by annealing is you have to heat treat it after it's been printed. And we're going to do a whole video on heat treating plastic here pretty soon. Then I would just leave it at that. Unless you have a need for it, stick with PLA. But PLA Plus, I love it. It works well. Printing it a little hotter, I don't find I get nearly as many breakages as I've found with other PLAs. It doesn't delaminate when you do this quite as easy.
The
RT,
problem is, though, too, it's also a bit of a buzzword. That's what you got to watch for. That there's no definition of what PLA Plus is, and that's the one thing I'm going to give you guys the education on tonight, because I've been hearing all sorts of different buzzwords for PLA alternatives and everything lately. That's all it is a buzzword. I can tell you, PLA, it's actually a chemical composition. PETG has a specific chemical composition, and outside of colorants, and I want to say it's glycerin, but it's something along that lines added in to lower the melting point for our printers. That mixture varies. But when it comes to PLA Plus, everybody is making up their own additives to PLA to make it stronger, but there's no uniform definition of PLA Plus that I've seen yet.
RT asks, do you need an all-metal hot end for PETG? Absolutely not. You do not need an all-metal hot end for PETG. You should have a throat that goes all the way down to your hot end without a PTFE liner. That doesn't mean that you have to have an all-metal hot end. You can buy throats that don't have a PTFE liner in them, and that'll print PETG I wouldn't say just as good, but sufficiently. But if you do want to make that investment into an all-metal hot end for printing PETG, then I definitely would. But the simple answer is no, you don't need it, but it's much better if you have it.
Yeah, if you have like an Ender 3, for instance, I know many people who have been printing since day one, PETG with the original hot end. The key is don't take that hot end above 240, and because you are not taking it upwards of 240, slow it right down. 10, 15 millimeters per second top speeds for first layer, no more than 30 on the adjacent layers, and then you got to slow down your retractions. You gotta be careful with it. It's not impossible, but it is certainly much more convenient. The all metal hot ends, and this is the controversial point I've read a lot about, is that they actually find that PLA tends to bind more to all metal hot ends, but when you get into the other materials such as PETG and stuff, it does not like to bind to metal whatsoever. So the likelihood of a clog on an all metal hot end is far lower. One, because you can print hotter, and two, because it has no interest in binding to the materials it's passing through while heating. I won't say what Joel Rayner wants to print.
I just banned him.
Yeah, but I mean, PETG is the better material. It's stronger, just simply put. If you can, PETG, when I first started printing, there was only PLA and ABS available. ABS, I actually managed to print ABS on my monoprice at the time. It's very tough, but it's doable. But it's stunk to high heaven, and so PETG is like, it's got the strength of ABS or similar to ABS, but it is far easier to print.
Alrighty, so I think we pretty much covered most of it.
Through all the questions. So obviously you guys have seen my helmet, which was a 5-day endeavor on the big machine, and right now it's starting on a 10-day one. I haven't seen a lot of what you guys have been printing this week, so if you haven't had a chance to hop on over to the Facebook group and post your photos, I'd love to see what you guys are printing, because it gives me motivation to get the other 5 machines going. Admittedly, I got my Filaments.ca order, so I've got about 28 kilos of filament now to work with. But I'm so precautious now. I'm like, I don't know if I want to print something, because I'm like, in 6 weeks, will I be able to order more?
Breaker19's asking, what color filament is the easiest to paint? I'll be perfectly honest with you, I do a lot of painting, and there's a great example back there. I do a lot of painting on my stuff, and I find that gray is the easiest to paint, but it really doesn't matter what color you print in, because at the end of the day, you're going to have to prime it anyway. So print whatever color makes you happiest. I do know that PLA accepts paint really, really well. So yeah, get yourself some gray primer, prime everything in gray, and then doesn't matter what color of PLA that you're using to print in.
Now, that being said, anything neutral, like a white to a gray to a black, is going to require less coverage
Yeah.
to prevent color bleed. It's similar to painting a wall, similar to painting a car,
Yeah.
whatever you name it. If you can get it to something that's neutral, it's going to reduce the likelihood of it piercing through. So Richard and I, we like to print in gray, but actually the reason we like to do that, and this is actually something Richard taught me almost in the first time we met, was that gray will show any kind of deformities much better than a white or a black. So for
Yeah,
example,
absolutely.
if I pull up, this is silver, but if we can see it, you can tell me which, is it easier to see any deformities on the black filament or on the gray filament? You tell me. And that's what it comes down to, is that gray is the most neutral, that we found that's easy to see any kind of defects or any seam lines that we may have missed. And gray is not normally a color used in many fillers. So myself and Jess, we use Bondo a lot. So you can definitely start to see the differences when you're putting this red Bondo over a gray. If you have a black, black hides seams. If you have a white, it's going to start collecting every particle in the room.
Speaking of fillers, let's really quickly touch on that. We may go long tonight, unfortunately. Not for, well, unfortunately for you and I, but I will tell you, I have started using wood filler as opposed to using that toxic 3M stuff that I've always promoted and told everybody to go out and use. I've been experimenting with wood filler, and I gotta tell you, man, that stuff works great. It doesn't smell. You can thin it with water. You can put it on. It dries fast. You're sanding in no time, and it takes paint really, really well.
I'm planning on revisiting Smooth On, to be honest with you. I haven't used it in a long, long time. But I've been thinking about doing it. You know, I don't mind sanding, but when it comes to, for instance, the this Mando helmet, I keep bringing back because I'm actually so happy with how it turned out. I think a simple pass of Smooth On will be enough to make this smooth enough for chroming.
Yeah, it might be.
I don't think the amount of sanding that I could do would get as close as the Smooth On products would. Now, that being said, that stuff is hefty price-wise, but you know, if that's what you're trying to go for a smooth finish to accomplish that look, it's not a bad thing. And I'll be posting my results as soon as I finish sanding off the bottom of the tree supports, which I don't know if you can see there, but I mean, they're always.
I've had that same issue.
Yeah, they cut your hands really well.
KKP 3D. I just want to touch on his enclosure. If you haven't seen it, go check out our Facebook group. That is Tim Acoin, who also helps us out with some of our designs. He did do a cleanup on our summer rocket, or our blast off logo for the summer. And if you guys like that, we will make it into t-shirts for you. If you don't, then we won't. So I might just get one made for myself. Who knows?
Yeah, it's fun. We've been in between production trying to have a lot of fun here.
Well, this is, you know, with all the COVID-19 crap that happened and is still happening.
I guess we're only allowed to mention it once, yeah.
Yeah. It's, things are starting to open up, but the reality is this is not something that's going away tomorrow. Just so you guys, you know, we're all on the same page that this is not going away tomorrow. But at the end of the day, if you can get out and have some summer fun, and that's why we chose to do rockets this summer. By doing the rockets this summer, we found that it gets us out. It gives us something interesting and new to print. Something to play with design a little bit. It's really helping me to up my game in Fusion 360, so I'll be able to start doing some tutorials on it very soon. And at the end of the day, both Brian and I got bit by the bug when we were out flying those rockets. We just had a great time. I saw one comment that said that we shouldn't have walked away with the sad Hulk style music. We should have walked away cheering and arms up in the air. We just thought it would be funny because we had a couple of failures to walk away with the sad Hulk music. So,
I just wish my drone footage wasn't a dud, because what happened was we had the one rocket we showed at the end that was that just kind of shot up and went down. Well, I had a cheap drone in the air, and I was trying to balance the whole thing out. It was terrible for tuning. And then I see this little rocket swim go through the sky. I try to bring it down, and the wind picked it up and flew it right through into a thing of trees and then off some guy's silo. And it was spectacular in how many failures happened in the course of 15 seconds.
Well, we're going to bring you more rocket action over the summer. And our next one, we've got to build the 3 rockets first, but I'm doing some testing right now with a design. And if it works out, we will have 3 of these guys to launch, and we'll paint them up all the same way, and we're going to dare you guys to tell us which is which. Now,
and with that being said, we are not becoming a rocket channel. This is just one of our many 3D printing and how it applies to hobbies for the summer. So you can see a lot more just fun projects to make it through this, because we're all going to be spending a bit more time with our families this year, which is a big bonus for me. So let's have some fun, and let's apply all these fun technical skills. And so we're gonna bounce back and forth between that and technical guides to get the most out of your printer, and maybe find some new creative use that you weren't thinking of yet.
There you go. Turtle Bumblebee, he says, any tips on printing TPU on stock Prusa printers? I heard the MK2S is better than the MK3S. Because of the differences in gear systems. I got my TPU at Spool 3D. If you got your TPU at Spool 3D, you've got a good quality TPU. I would just watch some more videos on printing with TPU. There's some really good ones out there. I've been printing TPU on the what machine? The Anycubic Zero, and I think that thing it's great for TPU. All of my tires have been done on it, but it does string a lot. So, and that has a lot to do with moisture, because TPU grabs moisture out of the air like there's no tomorrow. So, other than that, I don't really have any tips for on that specific machine. I will say your retraction, you got to watch your retraction, you got to watch your print speed, and you do have to watch your temperatures, okay?
Yeah, you nailed it. And then I think you followed up below, is there anything to purchase for the Mark IIs to print TPU better? Now, I don't know the Prusa's very well, honestly, but if it's anything like Creality's, what you're looking for is a geared extruder system that provides nowhere at all for that filament to go except down the Bowden tube. So if you can get a good dual gear extruder, that's great. If not, any kind of gear extruder assembly, I wish I had one in front of me, but a lot of the all-metal ones you can get now, you'll notice it has a channel that feeds the filament right into the gears and then proceeds to go directly out. So there's no wiggle. Because TPU is extremely flexible, and TPE is even more flexible. So you basically have to reduce the ability for it to go off in different directions, or it will spiral out of the extruder. You are stuck with the same equipment. It's all about slowing it down and reducing the amount of pressure that your extruder is applying on that material. Basically, let it almost flow out of the nozzle freely.
And there you go. Now, with that said, Brian, you've got a lot going on this week. I've got a lot going on this week, and this week coming, and we're going to try and get together this coming week, hopefully, either at my place or at his place. And we're going to get some more stuff out for you this week. Like I said, coming this Wednesday, we are going to be talking about some interesting prints that will help you through your summer vacation. Some stuff to keep the kids entertained, some useful stuff as well. So that might be something you want to watch, tell your friends about, and share with people. Give us a like down below. Leave us a comment on tonight's live stream. If you got something out of tonight's live stream, we really do appreciate it. I didn't even plug our little dollar sign there, our super chat.
Yeah, I was going to say, we didn't plug anything tonight.
No.
We actually had a lot of questions this week, and we appreciate that, guys. If you do send the questions in, the sooner the better in the week. If you do need a more immediate answer, the Facebook group is a great place to post. But if you want to tune in live and have a discussion about it, Richard, do we have the cards set up again?
We will have them this week set up, and I'm sorry, I've had a busy week.
We've been winging it lately, guys. So
I will have the production all set back up again this week. And we'll have all of our little super chats back, and we'll have all of our little sound effects, and everything will be back for you guys. Guy the Jedi makes a great point. 51 watching, only 17 thumbs up. Come on, guys. These two fellas take their time to help us, and so that we can support them. And I appreciate that. Guy the Jedi, thank you very much for that support. And again, leave us a comment. Let us know what you thought of tonight's episode. If you've got any questions, send them to questions@thefirstlayer.com. There is a link in the description below, and we will see you guys on Wednesday, and then again next Saturday night right here on the First Layer Ask for Help. Until then, my friends, remember that the First Layer is always your foundation to a great print. See you next week.
See you guys.